And on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for logging in this morning. Today's meeting will be conducted remotely utilizing the WebEx platform. And this teleconference meeting constitutes the board's regular meeting for the month of October 2020. We're very appreciative of all of you joining us this morning, and we appreciate your taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us. Thank you. Since we're now experienced in these WebEx platforms, we're not going to spend a lot of time going over them again. However, our staff will be happy to assist anyone who requires assistance and do that. If you need to contact them, it'd be Ryan Jones, our board clerk, Leslie Gallagher, our executive officer, Michael Wright, our chief engineer. Any of the staff will be happy to help any of you need help. Assistance. In addition, there's an extensive list of instructions on the second page of the agenda for those of you that can use that assistance. That may provide you some help too. Regarding the meeting process itself, I think the way we've run the meetings before have been generally pretty satisfactory, and therefore I'm going to proceed as like the same way we have before. As before, Ryan Jones will be moderating these proceedings from a technical point of view. He, as well as Leslie, Michael, and the rest of the staff, will field comments, questions addressed to the presenters or the board, either from texts or emails that they receive from you. And you can go to the chat room too if you feel comfortable using that alternative. Second, following each presentation, I'll ask the board for questions and comments. And then once the board is finished, we will then unmute the public and open it up to questions from the public, and then bring it back to the board after the public comments and ask the board for any final comments or modifications or adjustments, and then their final decision. After we've completed the public testimony, we'll, as I say, bring it back to the board. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded, similar to the streaming videos that we have for all of our meetings, and they're recorded and located on the same portion of our website that the streaming videos are. We'll be taking a break every hour or so for 15 minutes to give our reporter as well as the staff a break and to catch up. Our break for lunch, in case we need it, and I'm not sure we're going to need it today, but would be for 30 minutes. Ryan will place a sign on the screen that will indicate the break time, stating that the board is on short break and the estimated time that we will return to the meeting. I believe we have a rather light agenda today, but it does include some interesting items. And I've been informed that we do not have a session today. Therefore, I'm anticipating that the meeting will end around 1 o'clock or so. Regarding the items on today, there are several items under item 3 on the agenda. Ms. Dolan, our Vice President, will present the minutes of the August 28th meeting. This is the regular meeting of the board for your approval. Next, we have our consent calendar, which is item 5 on the agenda. The staff has informed me that all of these items are in order and that we have received core letters from all of the items. Therefore, unless someone from the board or the public wants to remove and discuss one of the items on the consent calendar, which are 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, and 5D, this will constitute the consent calendar and will be voted on with a single motion, second, and disposed of with a single vote. Obviously, the approval of the consent calendar is an action item for the board. Next, on item 3, legislative update. Darren Suin is prepared to give a short morning, Mike. briefing on the legislative update, both at the state and national levels. That will be, however, a brief presentation. Under item 8, items from the Department of Water Resources will be presented. There are 2 items listed on the agenda this morning. And then under the category of board items, item 9, we have 3 important items which are also listed on the agenda. Finally, we have our usual executive officers report, including informational staff reports for the board's review, and then we also have our normal board comments, meeting updates, and calendar for everyone's edification. As I've said before, we do not have a closed session this morning, so I'm anticipating, as I said before, that we should be ending the meeting around noon or 1 o'clock. As you're probably aware, the welcome introductions and announcement item is number 1 on the agenda this morning, and there are 3 items on that. We have completed the opening welcoming remarks, which I've just done, and then next, item 1, Leslie has an announcement related to 2020 Flood Week. Leslie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. Just as the board adopted the resolution in September, just remind everyone that Flood Preparedness Week is October 17th through the 24th, so we are in Flood Preparedness Week now. The official motto of that is be aware, be prepared, and take action. And I did put into the chat feature a listing of a website where you can go and type in your address, and it will tell you, it's a Cal OES sponsored website. It'll tell you all the hazards that are around your home, including fires, tsunamis, earthquakes, and floods, and has some specific advice for you that you could use to help be prepared and be ready to take action in case of an emergency. So thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to say that today.
Okay, any more introductory items, Les?
Just to note that you do have all your board members here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, we're on item 2. Ryan, please call the roll to determine for the record whether we have a quorum to conduct our business, please.
Thank you. Board Member Griego. Board Member Johnson.
Here.
Board Member Ramirez.
Here.
Board Member Valines.
Here.
Board Member Countryman.
Present.
Vice President Dolan.
Here.
President Edgar.
I'm here. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, members, we're on item 3, which are the minutes of our August 28th meeting, of regular board meeting. They're being presented for your approval, and obviously approval of these items. This minutes will be an action item of the board. Ms. Dolan, our Vice President, has this item. Jane, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thought the minutes were all ready for you to approve, but I want to note that on page 6, I'm going to fix the syntax and correct. That's where we congratulated 3 board members on Senate confirmation, and we identified all of them as reappointment. So I'm going to fix that. So it's appointment of Mr. Johnson and reappointment of the other 2. So let me, that was the only thing that I still caught. But let me pause. I'll count to 3. See if Brian found any typos. Or anyone else.
Board Member Dolan, did you happen to mention on the minutes under board member presence, the parentheses? Did you mention that that's position is full, been filled by me? Where it says there is currently 1 vacancy on the board.
Oh, well, that should be removed.
Thank you.
I apologize.
No worry.
We get the minutes 2 months before we meet. I remember when you joined us, when Brian joined us. It was great to have both of you. Okay, that will be corrected. Anything else? I hear nothing. So with 2 corrections to be made, I have approval of the minutes of August 28th, 2020.
Moved by Dolan. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mary Jane. Moved by Dolan, seconded by Ms. Griego. The minutes for August 28th are moved to be approved. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Members, we're on item 4, review of the agenda. Leslie, any changes you want to make or announcements on the agenda itself?
Mr. President, I would just note that on item 5B, the staff report indicated that we did not have a core permission letter at the time that we posted this. We have received that letter.
Thank you, Leslie.
Just note that. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, members, we're on item 5, the consent calendar, and we have 5 items on the consent calendar this morning. The staff has informed me, as Leslie just noted, that all the items are in order and have received core letters. Therefore, unless someone on the board or in the public wants to remove and discuss one of the items on the consent calendar, which is 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, and 5E, this will constitute the consent calendar and will be voted with a single motion, second, and disposed of with a single vote. Anyone from the board want to remove any of the items on the consent calendar? Okay, anyone from the public want to remove any item on the consent calendar? Ryan or Leslie, do you see any comments there?
Mr. President.
I see nothing either.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Do we have a motion and a second on approval of the consent calendar?
I move to approve this consent calendar.
Moved by Countryman, seconded by
Second.
Whoever.
seconded by Brian Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the consent calendar, all 5 items were approved unanimously. Thank you. Okay, item 6, members, this is public comments not on the agenda. If anyone has a comment or wants to address the board on matters not on the agenda, then this is your time to be recognized and address the board. Anyone in the public, Leslie or Ryan?
I see nothing from the public.
I don't see anything either, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll bring this back. Would you have any written things in the chat room or anything?
I was
Ryan?
just checking the chat, actually. I don't see anything there.
Okay. Then we'll go on to item 7, which is a legislative update, and Darren Soon is prepared to brief the board on some relevant items both at the state level and the national level. Morning, Darren.
Good morning, President Edgar. The board, Vice President Dole, and my name is Darren Soon, as you guys know, Principal Engineer Policy Advisor for the board. Ryan, do you have the slides we could share?
Yes, I do. I'll have them up in one moment.
Okay, thank you. So while I was getting ready, as you all know, the California legislature is currently not in session, but work on flood management related issues do continue. So I wanted to provide a brief status of some of the things the state and federal governments are doing. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Ryan. Thank you. So ironically, this is Flood Preparedness Week, as Executive Officer Gallagher mentioned. We surpassed a sad milestone with over 4 million acres burned this wildfire season. So the effects of climate change are ever present. For years leading up to the adoption of the Centralized Flood Protection Plan 2017 update, this board, DWR, along with the Army Corps of Engineers and others in the flood management community, worked and continue to develop strategies to mitigate the flooding effects of climate change. Recently, Governor Newsom issued an executive order N-82-20 to address the climate and biodiversity crises by conserving 30% of lands and coastal waters by 2030. I believe all of you have the entire copy of the executive order in your packets. Executive Order 82-20 calls for the development and reporting of strategies to the governor by February 1st, 2022, that remove carbon from the atmosphere by storing it in natural and working lands. Given this executive order, board staff will consider how this might affect the board's management of the thousands of acres in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Drainage District. At the federal level, I just wanted to take a moment at this time to thank Julie Luther with the National Waterways Conference for the latest information going on at the federal government as of Wednesday. I'm just going to mention a few of the highlights here, though. Congress, as you all know, is out and they're slated to return after the election for a lame duck session. To keep the federal government open past September 30, Congress passed and the president signed a continuing resolution bill that extended current fiscal year 2020 appropriations to December 11th. In that continuing resolution, Congress also extended the authorization for the National Flood Insurance Program to September 30th, 2021. Now, coincidentally, FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0 rolls out also on October 1, 2021. Risk Rating 2.0, for those of you who might recall from the Flood Management Association conference earlier this year, Risk Rating 2.0 considers individual flood risk factors, including flood type, cost to rebuild, distance from the flood source, instead of just the FEMA flood zone that the property is in. The Army Corps also continues stakeholder outreach on the new levee safety engineering circular. In fact, myself and Chief Engineer Mike Wright and other board staff, Chief Dua as well, met with the Corps earlier this week to discuss the engineering circular. I want to take a moment to also thank and commend the Army Corps of Engineers for their engagement on this issue. They weren't just listening, they actually came out from one of the representatives came out from Washington, D.C. We had a very good conversation. In fact, ASA's Assistant Secretary of the Army, R.D. James, and the Director of the Civil Works Program, Alvin Lee, were both on the call themselves personally. Secretary James's office also continues to develop agency-specific procedures for guidelines that federal agencies use to evaluate proposed water resource development projects. All of you may recall that for the Yola bypass, for instance, we've been asking for the Army Corps to consider life loss and other social effects in our feasibility studies. And so these guidelines, we hope that these what they call principle and guidelines will reflect considerations of these things. 2020, which all of us are also waiting for, it is being worked on. Congressional committee staff continue to negotiate in the hopes of adopting a bill later this year. And then finally, though it's not flood focused, but still germane to our work, I felt, last week, President Trump released an executive order modernizing America's water resource management and water infrastructure. The executive order establishes an interagency water subcabinet of senior federal agency officials to facilitate efficient and effective management and modernization of the nation's water supplies and systems, while also eliminating duplication between agencies. And with that, I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Questions from the board?
I don't. Thank you, Darren.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Darren.
Sure.
Okay, we'll move on then to item 8, Department of Water Resources. And under this item, under item 8A, Steve Rothert, the Chief of the Division of Multi-Benefit Initiatives, has submitted the written report for the Department of Water Resources for the board's review and information. And I believe he also has a little presentation he wants to make. Steve?
I don't believe he's connected to audio, I think.
Steve, you need to unmute there.
It should be on the left side of the left bottom side of your screen where the mute button would be. Say connect audio. Perfect. You should be unmuted now.
Okay, sorry for that.
Morning, Steve.
Good morning, President Edgar and Vice President Dolan and other board members. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update from DWR on two items. One is the progress of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan development, and the second is on the progress with the Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project, and we will have a short video from aerial drone that we captured, I think, a week or two ago, and I'll describe some of the features that we're seeing there, and to get a sense of the scale of the project and the progress. So first, with the CVFPB update, the flood planning team will be participating in a series of engagements in November, December related to the implementation progress of the system-wide elements of the plan. And as you'll remember, the large-scale system-wide multi-benefit projects are a key component of the plan to improve the long-term resilience of the flood system to climate change. And there are a number of engagements and events that are planned, including a presentation of the board's November public workshop and November and December coordinating committee meetings. Specifically, the YOLO Bypass Board workshop scheduled for November 6th will focus on the partnerships and collaboration and implementation and accomplishments at landscape scale actions in the YOLO Bypass and additional development of new multi-benefit projects and a variety of other policy issues. So hopefully folks know about the November 6th workshop and can attend if you're interested. The Tisdale-Sutter Bypass Planning group will provide a presentation at the November 18th coordinating committee meeting, and it will be a joint presentation of RD 1500, the Mid-Upper Sacramento RFMP group, and DWR, and it'll focus on where the regional planning, first reminding us of where the regional planning effort stood at the conclusion of the 2017 flood plan update and adoption, and the efforts then, and then the scope of the current planning efforts in the Tisdale and Sutter bypasses. There's quite a lot happening in Tisdale and Sutter bypass, and so lots to talk about there. Also, at the November 18th coordinating committee meeting, there'll be a joint presentation by DWR and the Nature Conservancy related to TNC's bird returns program and other activities that an analysis of opportunities that for providing groundwater recharge, migratory bird habitat, and flood risk reduction benefits. And I think at this point, all of the regional flood management planning groups have had at least one meeting and are getting into the work that they'll be doing and contributing to the whole overall plan for the 2022 update. So that's the update for the Central Flood Protection Plan progress. And now, Ryan, if we could queue up, and if we could just pause the video or not start the video just for a second, just to give a little bit of overview as a reminder to folks before starting the video. So the Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project is a great example of the multi-benefit projects that my division of DWR are implementing with the Flood Board and important local partners like SafeGA and others. And this project sets the YOLO bypass levee back, widening the bypass, approximately 1,500 feet, widening the Sacramento bypass and widening the Sacramento Weir. And it's a key component of the system-wide improvements to the flood system and will provide substantial flood risk reduction benefits to the region, especially the city of San Francisco, Sacramento, and West Sacramento. And let's see, so if we could roll the video now, Ryan.
For some reason, I'm not seeing the video in the slide. Sorry.
Oh, I sent you the, I'm sorry, I sent you the link before.
Oh, shoot. One moment.
Okay. Apologies, folks, while we pull this up. So we will see in this video, drone will, I think at first, be moving along the Sacramento bypass, and what you'll be able to see is the beginnings of the preparation of the ground for the footings of the levee, and then we'll also see the completed right landfill project, which transferred all of the hazardous waste that had been dumped along the Sacramento bypass levee near the toe and shifted it away from that levee, allowing the bypass to be expanded. And it's capped, it's shaped in a square, capped with clean soil, and I think in coming weeks we'll be hydro seeding it. And I believe it will be the location of some operational buildings down the road. The link.
I'm sorry, I haven't been able to find it. I just had the PowerPoint that you sent.
Okay. Let me just quickly apologize for this. And I wonder, President Edgar, whether we might want to move to the next item while I track down the link. We can come back to it. Of course, it's your call, but I don't.
That'd be fine, Steve. That'd be fine.
Okay.
Let's move on to it'd be item 8B. You want to proceed to that item?
I'm sorry, if you could back to the yeah, so I think this is the transfer is, and I can't see the agenda on my screen right now. I apologize. Is this the Jeremy Eric will describe the additional actions that DWR is prepared to focus on as the flood season approaches?
Well, I thought you were going to take up item B, which is the San Joaquin Restoration Program. Are we still on item 8A, Steve?
Yes, and I apologize, but for some reason I'm not.
Do you have items? Do you have other items under 8A that you want to discuss?
No, I don't. Just the video that we wanted to narrate the progress of the levels project. But maybe I think we were planning an additional item, Jeremy, Eric, to describe the additional work that DWR is going to be doing now. And when I can refocus on the agenda here and recenter myself, I've lost the reading on my screen. I can come back to the item that you're talking about, President Edgar, if that works for you.
Okay, Jeremy, you want to go ahead with your presentation. It's not listed on the agenda, but I guess you're going to be talking about Flood Prep Week.
Yes, President Edgar, could you hear me right now?
I can hear you. I can't see you.
Okay, I'm having technical issues, so I'm just going to go without camera for some reason today. Apologize. Good morning, President Edgar, members of the board. My name is Jeremy Eric, Chief of the Division of Flood Management with DWR. Thanks for allowing me to give an additional update on the DWR activities. Greg Farley did let board staff know that I was going to be providing an update in addition to Steve Rother's update. So apologize if that information didn't find its way to you on the agenda. I just felt this was a time-sensitive item to inform you about as soon as I could. So just want to take a minute. At the last board meeting, excuse me, I mentioned that California is battling some of the largest wildfires in our history of this fire season, and I talked about how debris flows are among the most hazardous consequences of rainfall on burned hill slopes. And as I expected, we're starting to receive mission task requests from Cal OES to assist the state in mitigating this hazard. So our first official mission task came from the office, Cal OES over the weekend. And Cal OES has tasked DWR to deploy subject matter experts to work with the California conservation crews in performing some remediation work at the burn sites of the North Complex Fire area. That's the area above Lake Oroville and Plumas and Butte counties, as most of you are likely aware. So 5 Division of Flood Management technical specialists out of our flood project inspection section were deployed this week, and a few will be deployed into next week. There's also a few Northern Region Office staff that'll be deployed in the coming couple of weeks. And this assignment could span on and off over the next few weeks, and more to come on that. But we may have additional inspection program staff being deployed. So the bottom line here is I wanted to inform you that as soon as I could, that these deployments will delay both the fall levee inspections as well as the completion and the delivery of the annual inspection report to the board. As you know, we typically deliver the annual inspection report by December 31st. And that this year that's going to be delayed. Our field inspections will be completed, and the individual inspection reports will be provided to each LMA by the end of November. So that's the good news. The LMAs will still have what they need heading into the rainy season. And our hope is to complete the annual report by the end of January. And of course, this schedule is subject to change as Cal OES gets its resources, compiled and figured out, and as things just evolve with the burn areas and the response that may be needed. So I'll continue to update you as our mission task work unfolds and we better understand how this affects our overall schedule. But just wanted to give you, the quick update as soon as I found out about it, which was this week. So we'll do our best to get that inspection report wrapped up. But just keep in mind that the LMAs will have the results of their inspections so that they know what their systems are looking like going into the flood season.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions from the board on that issue? Okay, thank you, and thank you for that report.
Thank you.
Steve, we're back to you. Do you have the video you wanted to?
You're on, there you are. You're on mute. You were on mute. We can hear you.
Sorry,
now.
thank you. Ryan and I are still trying to locate the functional link to it. I apologize for that. And maybe what we should do is go to item 8B, which is an update from board staff, I understand, and your reclamation folks on the San Joaquin River Restoration program with James Mendota. Their understanding.
We can do that. Do you want to come back to this other item or just forget it for today?
I'd love to come back to it if it's not too disruptive. And Ryan and I will keep working on it, and I'm confident we'll get to it. We'll find it in the next couple of minutes.
Okay, we're on item 8B, the San Joaquin River Restoration Program update, and This is an informational briefing on the status of the San Joaquin Restoration Program below Friant Dam to the confluence of the Merced River, including the establishment and self-sustaining populations of salmon and habitat restoration. And I think James Hirota and Liz Vasquez from the Bureau are going to give us a little informational report on this.
Good morning, President Edgar and board members. My name is James Hirota, Senior Environmental Scientist with the board. I'd like to thank and welcome our guest speakers today. Our first speaker is Elizabeth Vasquez, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, San Joaquin Restoration Program Manager. And our second speaker is Paul Romero, Supervising Engineer, Department of Water Resources. And today, Liz will begin our presentation, followed by Paul. Liz, would you like to start?
Thank you for that introduction, James, and President and members of the board. Yes, we'll give a quick update on the San Joaquin River Restoration Program, and then I will pass on the presentation to my colleague, Paul Romero, to talk a little bit about the work that DWR is doing in the Eastside bypass. So I will go ahead and get started. So can I?
Liz, could you introduce yourself, please, for the record?
Sure. My name is Liz Vasquez, and I work for the Bureau of Reclamation. I am a Deputy Program Manager for the San Joaquin River Restoration Program. I think Ryan, you have control of my presentation. Very good, thank you. So I added a little bit more information to this year's update. So I apologize if this is a bit of redundancy for some of you, but I did want to give a full picture for some of the newer board members. So to begin with, the San Joaquin River Restoration Program came out of some litigation that happened in the early 2000s. So going back to when Friant Dam began operation in 1942, the Bureau of Reclamation operated that facility such that portions of the San Joaquin River went dry on an annual basis. And when that happened, there were some effects to public trust. There was, and specifically, fish that were extirpated. So in '88, there was a lawsuit filed, and that was against Reclamation due to a renewal of some of our long-term contracts. There was in '04 a finding on Section 5937, which is a California Fish and Game Code law. And so the parties tried to initiate settlement at that point in '06, and we had federal legislation in '09. Ryan, can I go to the next slide, please? So what's in the settlement? So the settlement is driven by two primary goals, the first of which is my primary responsibility, which is the restoration goal. It really is looking at trying to restore and maintain fish populations in good condition through our restoration area, which starts below Friant Dam and continues to the confluence of the Merced. We're trying to provide habitat that is naturally reproducing and self-sustaining for salmon and other native fish. So that's really our primary goal that drives our restoration work in this part of the system. We also have a water management goal. Water management goal deals mostly with water supply and the Friant who their agricultural water for some environmental purposes. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So who are we talking about? Who are these settling parties? So the settling parties are a compilation of different agencies and private interests. We, as a settling party, Reclamation, the federal government, Fish and Wildlife Service, and NIMS signed on to the agreement, as well as the Friant Water Authority and NRDC. From the state perspective, we have an MOU with some state entities, and we usually refer to those groups as implementing agencies, specifically DWR and California Fish and Wildlife. Next slide, please. So what have we been doing? We signed this settlement in '09, and so in the process, we have done a lot over the last decade, most of which was directed at two things: reconnecting the river so that there was consistent flow in that section of river that went dry annually, as well as to bring back a race of spring run Chinook salmon. So we have substantial progress towards those two goals. So we have fish populations that have returned for the last 3 years. We have had spawning, we have had emergence of juvenile fish in the river, and then they've made their way to the ocean and come back. We also have been working with the stakeholders and with our own agencies to get the channel capacity that we need to maintain flow in this river year round. And so we do have flow connectivity 365 days a year at this point. So in 2018, we decided that we needed to take another look after implementing the settlement for a decade to really realign the funding sources we were likely to have with the work remaining in the settlement. And basically out of that process, we came a funding constrained framework implementation plan. That plan had two primary goals. The first of which was to get complete fish passage, or sufficient fish passage, let's say, at key large barriers in the system. So that is much of the work that we are doing to get passage around Mendota Dam and Zach Dam, as well as in the Eastside bypass itself. And then we need to have more flow consistently in the river. So building that channel capacity by both addressing the seepage effects to the neighboring farmland, as well as making sure that we have sufficient levee capacity. And the target for that is 2,500. Right now, we're more in the 200 CFS range, so there is definitely a lot of work there that needs to be done. Next slide, please. This has got a lot of information. I threw this in. I will not go through this whole slide, but I did want to allow the board members or others the opportunity to see some of the main points within the constrained framework. So I will leave that to you. But this is our restoration area. You can see Friant off to the right, and then the confluence of the Merced onto the left, and you'll see our reach designations, which we end up throwing around whether we want to or not. It starts at 1 at Friant and then goes on to the reach 5 at the confluence of the Merced. Much of my work for fish passage and trying to get channel capacity for reclamation is focused around a couple of places that are also shown on this map. So Mendota Pool, which is pretty much the center of the map, the lower portion, we have a large fish bypass that we're working on, as well as a fish screen. Sac Dam and Arroyo Canal, which is the last big diversion for the exchange contractors on the system. And that, again, is a fish passage and screening project. And then the area that you can see in purple, that is really where we're focused on trying to get that channel capacity, that 2,500 CFS through the whole system. And I will leave others to contemplate it later. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about fish. Like I mentioned, we have had fish returning to the system. This has got a lot of information on it, but I would like you guys to focus on the left corner. So this is where we are right now in the fish year, the fish monitoring year. This is when we really start initiating some of that really busy fish activity. So red survey August to November. And as you can see, to date in 2020, we have 17 reds. And this presentation was turned in 2 weeks ago. So now we have over 50. We have 53 reds that we have documented this year in the system. And they're expecting that number to ultimately be over 100. And you may say, well, why is that different than 18 and 19? Why is it more than 18 and less than 19? So it had a lot to do with our water condition this last year, which was drier than 19, but was sufficient to get some fish back in the system. So we're expecting to have a little over 100 this year as a likely amount of reds. Then the fish go through their complete life cycle. So they go and they do their nest and lay their eggs. They have emergence of fish. So we would see emergent trap information from that period. We would see fish out migrating and being caught in our screw traps on the way out to the ocean. And then we would, again, next spring, hopefully see those fish returning from the ocean. Of course, many of those fish have to take a ride in our trucks because they cannot actually make the ride all the way back up to Reach Run where our spawning habitat is because of the fish barriers. And so that's one of the things that really has been a focus here with the constrained framework. So next slide, please. So this is Arroyo Canal and Sac Dam. I wanted to give kind of an example of what these fish passage projects look like for us right now. So as you can see, Arroyo Canal is the diversion canal, and Sac Dam is a small low head pushes the water into that irrigation canal. Next slide, please, Ryan. And this is what we're proposing as a likely passage and screening alternative for this facility. So it would be basically a nature-like fishway or bypass to get the fish around Sac Dam, and it would be a V screen to keep fish from being diverted into the Arroyo Canal itself. Next slide, please. And so this picture is of the Mendota Pool Bypass and Reach 2B Improvements Project. And much as the Sac Dam project is arranged, this project would be very similar. There's a larger fish bypass in this instance. We're actually building about 3/4 of a mile of bypass that would connect Reach 2B to the portion of river downstream of Mendota Dam. And then we'd actually be doing a double V screen. So a V screen that could pass almost 2,000 CFS of flow into Mendota Pool at times. And this, of course, is our biggest project. And we've spent quite a bit of time on engineering. As you can see, the model in the middle of the page is a physical model that we've done of the structure that is the headworks for the bypass itself. We've done a lot of buying of land in this area as we need to acquire the footprint to construct all these features. And then we have also needed to work with our engineering firms to try and keep this engineering coming together in a way that's incremental and will have a durable, a good project that will ultimately be able to be part of a good operation at Mendota Pool. First and foremost, this facility cannot damage our contractual relationship to deliver water, and it's a big part of this project is to make sure that we bring this project together in a way that won't affect our water users. The one thing that I did also throw on here as far as the picture is I think there was a permit in front of the board for Maui Bridge. The Maui Bridge is a small project the city of Mendota, our partner, is putting into place and will ultimately be our main entrance and haul route for much of our levee setback. And that project will be initiated probably next week. So they have awarded a construction contract and they are getting their final paperwork in place to issue their notice to proceed. And they're thinking it will likely be the first week in November. And now I'd like to pass it on to Mr. Romero here, if we can. Yeah, there you go.
Good morning, President Edgar, members of the board. My name is Paul Romero with the Department of Water Resources out in the Fresno office. So as Liz mentioned, one of the current focuses of the program is to achieve fish passage throughout the restoration area and restoration flows of 2,500 CFS. And the Eastside Bypass project is an important project to allow the milestones, these early milestones, maybe not as big as some of the projects that Liz mentioned, but ultimately important just the same. Now, as a reminder, the Eastside Bypass Improvements Projects has 3 elements to it: 2 fish passage elements and a levee improvement element. This stretch of the bypass is in Merced County. This project is a collaboration effort between the Bureau of Reclamation and the Department of Water Resources. The next slide. So the first project is the removal of 2 refuge weirs that are in the Eastside Bypass, and this is a Bureau of Reclamation project. They started the project in 2019 by removal of the lower weir, and you can see that picture in the upper left during construction, removing of the weir, and then the bottom left after the weir has been removed. There's also an upper weir that the Bureau will remove in 2021. Next slide. So the second element of the project is a levee improvement project that DWR is conducting. So DWR will be installing 2 miles of soil bentonite slurry wall in one of probably the weakest levees in the Eastside Bypass. It's a 2-mile reach And we're installing the slurry wall to improve seepage and stability issues. Next slide. So the project started earlier this year in spring of 2020. You can see the construction of the wall being done right there. And next slide. Another element of the project was to replace, essentially in kind, 6 drainage culverts that are in the levee that helps improve interior drainage. So that was a big portion of the project also. Next slide. And as you can see, earlier this month, the contractor was essentially putting the final touches on the strengthened levees. So the project is essentially done. It was completed last week with only one little element that needs to be done. There was a special gate that needed to be fabricated, and that will be installed next month. But essentially, this project is complete, and we'll have project closeout pretty soon. Now, as a reminder, this is just a great project, not only because it's going to allow the restoration program to increase restoration flows in the area, but it also really strengthens a levee that's probably the weakest in the system that will now perform much better during flood conditions. Next slide. So the third element of the project is a fish passage project at the Eastside bypass control structure. As a reminder, this structure is a barrier to fish passage for 3 main reasons. The bottom left photo shows the sill at the end of the structure that requires fish to jump over it, and during the really low flows, they just can't get over this sill. In the bottom right, you see the baffle blocks. These blocks cause navigation issues once these fish get into the structure. And then the top right are the flashboards at the upstream side of the structure. Again, another barrier because of requiring the fish to jump, especially during the lowest of flows. Next slide. So with DWR is we have a design that we're essentially simply just putting rock downstream of the structure to allow Chinook salmon and other fish to swim the structure and not have to jump over barriers at the structure. A part of the project also is some modifications to the control structure itself. And we've had several iterations of design that we've been working with the LMA to address any concern from the changes that we're going to make. In fact, from the last time we met to brief the board, we went through another iteration of changes to the design in which we reduced the changes to the downstream sill, where we're not taking the entire sill out. We're just removing a portion of it, and we're not taking every other block out, but we're actually leaving some of the blocks on the outer bays in completely, again, to provide better hydraulics during a flood event. So right now we're just waiting for comments back from the LMA, and we're hoping to get those soon so we can further our project to get it into construction. Next slide. Unfortunately, we've missed our window of opportunity for constructing in 2021. We had a very narrow window, and it doesn't look like we're going to be able to meet that. So we're pushing our construction back to 2022. So we're hoping by the end of this year to finalize our design, finish our permitting early 2021, and then advertise, start, and complete construction of the fish passage project by the end of 2022. Next slide, Ryan. So as we are making progress with these other projects on the Eastside bypass, we're now going to start moving our focus upstream to a flood control structure on the San Joaquin River. So this is the San Joaquin River control structure, which is a structure that's on the San Joaquin River about 50 miles downstream of Bryant Dam. Now, this structure is very similar to the structure that we're improving fish passage at on the Eastside bypass, with 3 main differences. The one, it's a much smaller structure. It only has 4 bays and not 6. The other one is, as you can see in the bottom inset photo, that it has a trash rack in front of it. We're not sure if that's going to be a fish passage barrier or not. But really the main issue is how the structure is operated. Next slide, Ryan. So the San Joaquin River control structure is part of the Chowchilla bifurcation. So flows come out of Friant on the bottom right of the picture, and then they hit this bifurcation. During restoration flows, when there's no flood flows in the system, those flows are the Chowchilla bifurcation structure, which is in the middle of the picture, are closed, and all the restoration flows go into stay in the San Joaquin River through the San Joaquin River control structure. However, during flood events, it's totally opposite. So most of the flows continue up to the right part of the picture into the Chowchilla bypass. And in that case, the Chowchilla bypass control structure is open. In the San Joaquin River control structure, those gates are operated, closed partially, in most cases, mostly closed. Now, this is an impact to fish passage. So as we are trying to improve fish passage at the San Joaquin River control structure, we can't just put rock behind the structure, downstream of the structure, and allow fish to swim through it, because these gates are operated pretty much every flood. Unlike the Eastside bypass control structure, where those gates are only operated in emergency situations, and it's our understanding that that structure has only been operated once in the 50 years of operation. So we were pretty comfortable of providing passage through the structure. But in this situation, we're going to have to bypass the structure. So we're going to either use a ladder or a natural fishway and get fish around the structure, which was going to be much more complex and a much more costly project. And this is, again, a project that is scheduled to be implemented in this first phase of milestones for the restoration program. Next slide, please. So one of the other things I wanted to update the board on is the work that DWR and Reclamation are doing on the maintenance of the flood system. So as we've talked about before, with restoration flows in the system 24/7, 365, this is causing some issues with the ability of the LMA to maintain the system. Generally, they're used to maintaining the system in a dry situation, which is possible because flood flows only occur on the system every 4 to 5 years. But now, with the system wet continually, it prevents them from doing some of their maintenance, as well as in others, it just increases the cost or changes the types of method that they would need to do. So DWR has been working with the LMA to understand different methods to maintain the system and to try to ultimately understand the additional cost of maintaining the system in a wet system. We've been working with the LMA for quite some time, probably a year and a half. And we recently, last month, had a good meeting with the LMA. And I think we have a path forward in identifying methods to maintain the system in the wet. And you can see we're really focused on 4 types of maintenance. One is maintenance of the trash rack, maintenance of the control structures, whether repairing or painting, and then the flap gates, and as well as channel vegetation. So we're continuing that work. The Bureau, the department, flood board staff as well, and the LMA have also met a couple times regarding maintenance, trying to understand how to fund these additional costs of maintenance to the flood system. Unfortunately, in our couple of meetings, no one's raised their hand to pick up those additional costs. But really, I think the first aspect of this work is really to understand what those costs are. So hopefully in the next month or two, DWR and the LMA can come together and develop some real cost of what it is going to cost to maintain the system in the wet. and hopefully in future meetings, we will be able to have more productive meetings to understand how to fund these increased costs in maintenance. I will say we have had a couple small but important successes on this issue. So if you can go to the next slide, Ryan. The first one is the cleaning of the trash rack. When we briefed the board last time, we mentioned that the trash rack was full of debris, and you can see that bottom inset photo, what it looked like last year. And because this debris was causing a fish passage issue for out migrating juvenile salmon, the Bureau of Reclamation was decided and was able to come in and clean the trash rack. And you can see earlier this year what that trash rack looked like after it was cleaned. So that was definitely a success in helping the restoration continue to provide passage for juvenile salmon. And then the next slide, please. And then another success that was while we were implementing the levee improvement project and replacing the drainage culverts, we actually were able to put wing walls on those culverts that were notched that would allow flashboards to be put in front of the flap gates. This will then allow the flap gate to be isolated during a wet condition, and the LMA to maintain them, to operate them, to make sure that they are ready for the flood season. You can see in the bottom inset photo, that's what the structure looked like before the construction. So again, small steps, but progress, and hopefully the next time we update the board, we'll have even more progress to report on this issue. That's important not only to the restoration program and allowing, but also to the flood system and making sure that it can be maintained and operated as it was designed to be. Next slide. So that's all I had. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity for Liz and I to come and brief the board on updates of the restoration program. And Liz and I are happy to answer any questions the board would have. Thank you.
Okay, Paul, this is Bill Edgar. I'm very interested in the last part of your presentation in terms of the maintenance costs and the costs that are impacting the LMA down there, because I think bottom line is they're getting hit from two areas. One is the higher cost to maintain the facilities in a wet environment, and that's going to, I think, require additional people and better trained people, new training and so on. Plus one-time costs of new equipment, I'm sure. But also they're getting hit with another side, and that is, as we're implementing the restoration project, land is being taken for the necessary work that's being done for the restoration project, which reduces their area to be assessed to generate funds to offset these costs. So they're being hit from two sides. One is the impact and the cost related to the project itself, and then the land that's necessary to generate revenue from an increased assessment is also a problem. Now, I think, hopefully in the next month or so, you're going to be able to land on what these additional ongoing costs are, and I'm assuming you already have pretty much a handle on what the one-time equipment costs and those kinds of things are. But these are the issues the board is interested in, because the bottom line is that LMA doesn't have a lot of ability to generate the funds that they need to do these costs. So it's going to fall upon the board and the department and everybody else to make this project work and make sure that the flood impacts are mitigated. So I'm concerned about that. I'm glad to see you've made some progress and you recognize that there is an issue here. But that's certainly a concern, I think, of the board and certainly myself. But thank you for doing that. Are there any other questions from the board or comments?
President Edgar, Brian Johnson here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. But I really wanted to thank for this. I thought the briefing was well organized and informative, and I'm very pleased to see the project moving forward with some complications and occasional delays. The progress is satisfying. I know it's an important statewide priority and important to our fellow agencies here. And so I know that our staff will be wanting to do everything we can to have our shoulder to the wheel and help moving it forward. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Paul and Liz. Appreciate those presentations. Is there anything else you want to add before we go on to the next item?
I did have one item to add, President, that we did do a little bit of investigation in was our PALT program. So it's payment in lieu of taxes program. And we do think that the levy district is eligible for that. And so we have done some of the work behind the scenes to add those pieces of lands that we are anticipating to buy and fee to the PELT program, which then would allow the county to receive proceeds that could flow down to the levy district. So we are looking to see if there's some way to at least alleviate some of the pressure on that LMA in regard to land acquisition.
Well, that's great. How does that work exactly? Is that a subsidy from the federal government to the county? Kind of like a tax increment?
So what it basically is really a payment in lieu of the taxes that we know would have been expected for the land that comes into federal ownership.
Okay.
So it's a way for the federal government to provide that tax income to local actors to make sure that they still have the resources they need to do their good work. It's a program that is authorized by Congress and, of course, appropriations. So it's hard for us to commit long term. But generally for us, it is fairly automatic. If we put it on the PALT rolls, there is a high potential for the county and through the county and the LMA to receive some funding.
Well, that's great. So it just basically is part of your operational budget?
Yes, it's basically part of annual operations. I can give more details, though. I'm not an expert in PELT. I am just passing on what I've heard from my
I understand. I'm just understanding if it's part of your annual operating budget and it's essentially